Leave your comments on the Ask Reddit sub, and I'll read your answers on the next episode of LWIAR 2. Police officers of Reddit, what are you thinking when you see cases like George Floyd? Horrified, when you have someone in custody you are responsible for their safety and well-being. Yeah, 3 other cops sat there and did nothing. Are the cops trained to kneel on person's neck when detaining him? Training varies by jurisdiction, but many of them explicitly say not to kneel on someone's head neck, due to the number of injuries it can cause. In Minnesota it is largely banned, but it is not in Minneapolis where he was killed. www.insider.com edit. To provide some more details. In order to be allowed to do it in Minneapolis, you have to be trained to do it in a way that doesn't block someone's airways for exactly this reason. So even though it's an allowed non-deadly use of force, there is a specific way to apply it, and their officer did not remotely do it the proper way. The fact that the state will train you how to kneel on somebody's neck legally is kind of symbolic. If one of your fellow officers did that, how quickly would you alert their boss, internal affairs, and the media? You're one of the good ones, right? Why don't we see police officers or departments come out and condemn things like this when they happen? I was on a police subreddit yesterday and most people seem to agree with you, and stressing that this is less common than the media would have us believe. It was basically boiled down to, yeah, this is bad. The media jumps on it and the police are not set up to fight a PR battle with the media. I understand that argument, but when so many people agree that what happened is wrong, wouldn't it be a good move to stand up and say, we do not condone this as an organization? It's a really bad look when they stay quiet, or as is the case most of time, back up the officer in question. It's like, if there was a problem with mailmen stealing packages, I would expect the post office to fire them, have them arrested, and let the public know that it won't be tolerated. We see police unions support politicians for election, but we never see them come together to condemn this sort of thing. It's just a really bad look for all the good cops out there, and I wonder why they don't speak up more often. I can't speak as a police officer, but I can speak as a public employee. It's simple. I am not allowed to make statements on behalf of the government. Now, if you are asking why culture that allows things like this to happen or allowed to foster, I'll leave that to the Leos to answer. Edit. For everyone's clarification, I'm merely stating the facts, not taking a side. It's a great question, especially since their unions seem well set up to lobby against any sensible reforms. Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo is speaking and tweeting out against it. He used to be Austin's chief. I really appreciate him doing that. I appreciate that. Next though, he needs to finally address the no-knock plainclothes raid that ended up with 2 people dead and exposed HPD faking evidence and showing how crooked cops could be. Edit. I was too hasty in writing this and got the details wrong. It was the police union chief, Gamaldi, who said the line about making a list, sorry for the misinformation, and please don't buy awards. What the frick? This is why so many people don't like cops. Their silence invalidates the bad apple argument. Edit. Feel like some PPL are confused by what I meant. Maybe I used the wrong terms. What I wanted to say is that when everyone screams, all cops are pigs, etc., the opposing argument is, no, there are just bad apples, but most cops are good. And my point is, if that is true, if most cops are good and these incidents are only the result of bad apples, then they need to condemn said apples. But when the police remain silent, it makes it seem like they are treating the cop in question as one of their own, rather than a apple. How can there not be any police organization, chief, union, station, whatever that comes out and says what he did was freaked up and belligerent and we condemn that? That is what they need to do to get the people on their side. Isn't the bad apple argument that a few bad apples spoil the bunch? Yeah, but what they are saying is that since the good apples don't stop the bad apples, there are no good apples. Until the good apples prevent bad apples from committing crimes, the argument is invalid. That's the sentiment behind all cops are bastards. It's not that every individual cop is a bad person. It's that they uphold an institution that often does things like kneel on somebody's neck until they die. I have a degree in law enforcement and work in corrections in Minnesota. My thoughts are, frick that guy. Nobody is taught to put their knee on a guy's neck and leave it there until he passes out and dies. He may as well have had his hands around the man's neck. If I were to go off the video evidence, The officer should be arrested for murder. Correction. All of them present should be arrested for murder. Edit. They actively prevented others from intervening despite being told multiple times how serious the situation was. So yes, they all are guilty. Edit. There is a difference between what they deserve and what can be reasonable proven. I get that. I speaking about what they deserve. You're right. One of the others definitely could have stepped in and took over. I have no freaking idea why they just kept him there on the ground like that after being cuffed. It's ridiculous. Would they all get the same charge? I'm assuming the idiot with his knee on the man's neck would get a more severe charge, right? Edit. So the other men are accomplices, not accessories, which means they could face the same charge. We will see though. If you drive a getaway car and the guy inside shoots the clerk, you catch a murder charge. This is worse than that. That's the crazy thing about this case. It couldn't be more blatant. The footage was clear, long-lasting and heart-wrenching. If there isn't hell to pay with this clear of evidence, then protests are absolutely justified. The Rodney King case had the same type of evidence, and look where that went. I can't understand why, but these cops can get away with murder with a slap on the wrist, unfortunately. What about that guy who was arrested because the cops broke into the wrong house and killed GF, and in self-defense he shot? Crap cops. Thankfully I heard they dropped all charges against that dude. Still a tragedy. Did the officers who murdered the sleeping woman get charged for murder though? They shot her like 8 times while she slept after working a double as an EMT. As a first responder during the coronavirus pandemic. In other words, dropping charges against the boyfriend is not enough. This woman was murdered, and she deserves justice. Not a local. I'm a Fed. 5 years into the job. George Floyd was murdered and it's freaking disgusting. We're trained that anything involving the neck is a no-go and is considered deadly force. We were also trained that if you make an arrest in a prone position, you search and then immediately move them onto their side or a seated position because the risk of asphyxiation is so great. If a suspect says they can't breathe, believe them and take measures to correct it. This training is reinforced at least twice a year in our use of force training. These officers deserve to spend the rest of their lives in prison. It's reassuring to hear this. Any suggestions on how employment screening could be improved to avoid letting people like this join the ranks and tarnish the reputation of all the good cops? I'm a former police officer, and so have had plenty of training in physical restraint of individuals being arrested. There is no police academy training officers to kneel on someone's neck to subdue them. That's how you kill a person. There is extensive training on how to avoid seriously injuring a person while restraining them. And I guarantee you every one of these officers was trained to never strike a person in the neck or choke them. The officer who killed him is very clearly liable for manslaughter at the very least. And I think the other officers who stood by have some accountability as well because they knew damn well that was not how you handle a person, and should have stepped up. There is no police academy training officers to kneel on someone's neck to subdue them. That's how you kill a person. This is why it's quite apparent the officer had intent to end their guy's life. Any sane person, officer or not, would not have wanted to kill someone over what that guy did in the last 10 minutes of interaction. The officer had the eyes of someone who wouldn't think twice about the value of the man he's causing to lose consciousness. Here's my question. Given that this officer was actively killing a man through an illegal use of force, what would have happened had a non-police officer stopped him? Granted, then the outcome wouldn't have killed the man and thus there would have been no death to show that the use of force was obviously excessive. But that's the part that really makes me angry. Anyone who would have tried to stop this would have been arrested on the spot for assaulting an officer, even though the officer was literally murdering another human being. Lawyer here. While the literal text of most justification, necessity defenses would apply to using force in that situation, most likely the Good Samaritan would be charged with obstruction or interference with public duties. They would then have to convince a jury that there was no other reasonable recourse short of physical force. That's a tall order and I'd be real nervous for my client. In a worst-case scenario, our hypothetical Samaritan gets tased or shot or killed for their troubles. My thoughts. Record and verbally demand the officer stop is probably the wisest course. But that is exactly what happened. And clearly the end result is that the cop didn't stop and someone died. the wisest course because unfortunately a more interfering action may get you seriously hurt or killed. Yeah, those situations don't often have win-win endings, unfortunately. A post I can finally answer. Based in Scotland. I'm a police officer with 5 years service, 2 of which I have been a part-time officer safety instructor. During this training we go over retraining subjects and handcuff techniques that we use to AT. This includes all safety aspects including where to apply handcuffs, how tight they should be, ensuring the technique is done correctly and that the subject is in a controlled but safe position. Positional asphyxia is a vital topic we cover and it is reiterated time and time again that if a subject ends up on the ground we never, and I reiterate again, never, place any sort of weight on them. Hell, even when sitting in the back of our cars, we watch them and ensure they can breathe and are in a comfortable position for transport. What these cops did was just plain stupid, disproportionate and frankly an embarrassment to policing. I'd also use disgusting if I'm honest. I just hope that people know we are not like this. Edit. This is my first comment and it has received more attention than I could have imagined. Which I thank you all for. To address some points raised in the replies. I appreciate I work in a far different environment but we still have to restrain subjects while cuffed and at no point has it resulted in an incident like this or even an officer in the position shown in the video. I absolutely condemn his actions and this should never have happened. As for what was going on his head, I have no idea whether it be red mist or he thought something else. Either way he should lose his job and face the full consequences of his action. Unfortunately some hate, as expected, in some replies which I understand. However, one officer cannot be held accountable for another. So again I hope people understand that this is a small minority of the job and the rest are always there to help. Stay safe, folks. Visited Scotland a couple years ago and loved it. Most jarring thing on the whole trip was walking into the Glasgow airport to fly back to the US and seeing cops with assault rifles standing near the escalators. Didn't run into any cops during the rest of my time there, but had in the back of my head that they're typically not armed. I guess airports are a special threat environment. UK police aren't routinely armed, but there are always armed police. Usually on fast cars so they can get to specific calls, reports quickly if there's a hint of a possibility that someone is armed. They also patrol high-risk places, usually airports but also any places deemed high risk for possible terrorist attack. Also, shooting is always considered an absolute last resort, unlike America where shooting is done when the victim's breathing scares a cop. Retired after 28 years. Nothing less than murder. All the guys I worked with would never have considered doing something like that. You treat combative in custodies once they're secured as human beings. Nothing should be personal. Once they've been subdued and you are safe as an officer, you stand him up, pat him down and understand that your arrestee is at a low point in his life. Give him some dignity and you'll generally get his respect. It works 90+% of the time. That man was subdued and nobody should have been on him at that point. Cop here, disgusted. There are 1,000 reasons why this shouldn't have happened. Simple, easy, steps that should have been taken. Lessons that policing has learned over the past 200 years and basic things taught in every academy. Make no mistake, this was murder. Maybe not premeditated murder, but nonetheless murder. I will be angry if those officers do not get indicted. He's apparently been involved in at least 2 other deaths including shooting a fleeing suspect in the back. I dunno, given that history, premeditation seems reasonable. That is inexcusable. Retired. It disgusts me as the job is difficult enough as it is. Working mostly in sensitive neighborhoods. Brutality like this makes it far more difficult. And then to fire rubber bullets and tear gas into the crow of protesters as a first salvo. This police department is insane. 2 weeks prior, white guys in the same city stormed the Capitol building with guns and the cops just took it. Edit. Thanks for the gold. ACAB. How difficult was it for you to build community trust? Did you have to continuously fight against atrocities such as the recent cases? Or was your community more sheltered from those issues? I worked in a place where the population was about 75% black. As a white cop, I very quickly learned a lot about being respectful and how to be tactful. Humor goes a long way and it's very important not to give off any sign of being fearful. They can sense it. You get used to shouts of abuse as you drive by, and guys on the corner will try to provoke you by openly drinking beer. Is it illegal? Yes. But you learn to pick your battles. If you do ever need to stop someone and question them, you know that if you take too long, you will suddenly find yourself surrounded by an angry crowd who have no idea what you are asking. People in these areas are almost always reluctant to even be seen conversing with a cop out of fear of being seen as a snitch. It is true that if you do need to make an arrest, there will almost always be some level of resistance, which makes things very difficult, as once you have made the commitment to make the arrest, you have to go through with it. I am not in any way making excuses for the cops in this particular video, but it isn't easy. However, the cop with his knee on the poor guy appears to be of the alpha male type of cop. These guys are bullies by nature and very difficult to work with if you personally police to different standards. It's very difficult to intervene as a partner, as you will likely be ostracized. You take this route and your career is over. Your social life is over. Your marriage will have problems, as cop families are pretty close. The idea of internal peer pressure to be more like these bully types is so gross and self-perpetuating. Thank you for the detailed response. The perspective here on the difficulty of intervention needs to be higher up. How many people won't pick a fight at Thanksgiving dinner about Kaepernick, let alone intervene in a case where you know you'll be the only person to pay the price? The cops sitting around didn't know the victim would die, and if they intervened and he didn't die, sounds like they'd be just as ostracized, and that would be the end of their career in local law enforcement. The culture is the problem. Very interesting perspective. Thank you for that. Let's not forget the cop standing next to the cop strangling the innocent man. He was equally guilty. Interesting last paragraph. Thanks for your perspective. That last paragraph is everything. It really is. And unfortunately it puts the attitude behind ACAB in a certain context. If you get kicked out of the barrel for challenging the rotten apple, is it just a rotten apple, or is the whole barrel spoiled? I'd put a serious tag if I were you. I dunno. I don't think it's sort of thing people joke about. That said, I reckon there'll be a lot of "not a police officer" comments. Not a police officer, I agree. Now to sort by controversial and see all the failed attempts at humor mixed in with people be wrong or offensive. Current sheriff's deputy from the Midwest here. It's a constant point emphasized in defensive tactics training that you don't choke someone or go for the neck, unless the suspect has the upper hand and your curtains are closing and it's your last resort to survive. Obviously that wasn't the situation here. What do you think has caused law enforcement to become worse? Decades of no accountability, and the culture of "we protect our own." I'm a police officer in California. I am absolutely disgusted by the officer's actions. When someone is in our custody, you must treat them properly. I don't care if they are arrested for murder or forgery. They are a human with a story, and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I had tears streaming down my face watching the video of George Floyd. We swore to protect our communities, and that's what we set out to do every day. Putting a knee into the neck of a handcuffed man for an extended period of time isn't protecting. A man has lost his life due to the gross negligence of an evil person. May he rest in peace. Thanks for watching LWIAR 2. The best of all time r/AskReddit submissions and comments. If you like this video, check out the original LWIAR channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe.